COP28, 6 themes. Theme number 4, laying the foundation for exponential growth in renewables. Hi, I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society, and we're offering this short series in 6 parts to give you some background information on what's going on at COP28, the Conference of the Parties. That means all the nations that signed on to the UNFCCC in 1992, and they've had conferences every year since then. This is their 28th. Every time they meet and they say, yes, we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but really what they do is they find ways to take more money from your pocket, and greenhouse gas emissions continue to go up. Of course, the premise is that if they did manage to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, then we would stop climate change. And of course, lots of scientists dispute that thesis, and you can find many of those scientists on our website in our past events section. So I want to walk you through this theme today on laying the foundation for exponential growth in renewables, and to show you some of these implications. So Robert Lyman prepared the text. I'm just going to read through it and add a few comments here and there for clarification. So the 6 themes of COP28, which Robert felt were the most important, are these. We've covered these 3 in previous presentations. Now we're going to look at laying the foundation for exponential growth in renewables, and we'll have 2 more segments coming up after. So the goal is the conference will seek countries' agreement to triple renewable electricity generation capacity to at least 11,000 gigawatts by 2030, and to double progress on energy efficiency, and to completely phase out methane emissions from oil and gas. What's the factual background? Well, according to Statista, the world's electricity generation capacity in 2022 was 8,511 gigawatts, of which renewables, including hydroelectric sources, totaled 3,027 gigawatts, but renewables excluding hydro totaled only 1,840 gigawatts. So 11,000 gigawatts would represent almost a quadrupling of total generation capacity in a world in which the development of additional large hydroelectric projects is increasingly difficult and costly. And that's mostly because the best hydro locations have been taken. The actual generation of electricity in 2022, according to the Statistical Review of World Energy 2023, was 29,165 terawatt hours, of which renewables, excluding hydro, totaled 4,204 terawatt hours, or 14.4%. So that's not very much. And one of the things you have to keep in mind in considering adding that many renewables to the grid is when you add more renewables, you need to add equivalent conventional generation for backup. Because when the wind drops off or the sun goes behind a cloud or when it's nighttime, you still need whatever power, capacity, generation. You need that generation to fill the gap, to fill the needs of the consumers and industry. That doesn't go away just because the wind drops off or the sun goes down. And it's just not true that the wind is always blowing someplace or the sun's always shining somewhere. It's simply not true. I think if you look at a lot of Václav Smil's work, he's got a number of videos, short papers, he's got about 40 books on energy. He's definitely the world expert. Or if you look at Francis Menton at Manhattan Contrarian, and even Net Zero Watch in the United Kingdom, they do a number of reports that show the impossibility of switching to renewables overnight in any capacity without conventional backup. We also have a number of reports, one by Ken Gregory, which talks about the electrification of the United States and the staggering sums of money it would cost, and a number by Robert Lyman, and we have a few specifically about Alberta, like the true costs of wind and solar for Alberta, what you really need to know about renewables that the Pembina Institute won't tell you, and In the Dark on Renewables. Those are a few of our reports. So have a look at those and understand how incredibly complex and actually dangerous it is to try and meet such targets in a short period of time without some new modern technology that would replace the fossil fuel backup we rely on today. So another complicating factor is that there's no material supply chain to triple renewables by 2030, nor the transmission lines. And this is a video by Simon Michaud, and he simply extrapolated the needs of these material supply chains, the needs that we have in 2019 to what we would need for net zero, and you find that the number of years to produce equivalent and necessary materials for this alleged transition, they're just impossible. It's not going to happen by 2030, that's for sure. Not to mention, mining critical minerals for renewables requires much more oil, natural gas, and coal to make the equipment, to create the mines, to process and ship the raw materials, and new mines take 16 years to get up and running. So that would be 2039 before additional production starts. And here's John Lee Pettimore. He's a former mining mechanic. He's educating the entire world about the realities of mining. And he said, I get asked this question a lot. How much fuel does that bad boy burn? Well, the 9800 runs 2 engines, each of them 2,000 horsepower. Each engine burns about 120 gallons per hour, or 2,880 gallons per 12-hour shift, or 2 million gallons per year. You can't make green energy without a lot of diesel fuel. So that's a little reality check there. But back to Robert Lyman's analysis of the COP28 goals. They have a plan to double progress on energy efficiency. And Robert points out there's no reliable statistical data on energy efficiency trends due to the problems in defining what these are. But that may be where the obsession of the Liberal government of Canada has come from regarding heat pumps. It may be related to this climate target. And as we know, heat pumps are not suited to very cold temperatures like we get in Canada. Methane emissions reduction. Well, methane emissions from oil and gas constitute about 20% to 25% of the methane emissions from human activity, and about 15% of total methane emissions. Excuse me. 40% of the global methane emissions are from natural sources. So that would be things like swamps and sloughs and even hydro dams. They're large emitters of methane. Yet eliminating the emissions from oil and gas gets about 100% of the attention from the UN and other parties. So remember that 40% of the global methane emissions are from natural sources, but eliminating methane gets 100% of attention from the UN. Methane emissions are notoriously difficult to track and measure, and abatement measures vary widely in terms of cost per metric ton abated, feasibility, and ease of implementation. Full deployment of measures in all economic sectors would cost an estimated 60 billion US to 110 billion US annually up to 2030, or 150 billion to 220 billion US annually up to 2040, and 230 billion to 340 billion annually, and that's in US dollars again, up to 2050, for a total cost ranging from 3.3 trillion to 5.1 trillion US over a 30-year period, and that's according to McKinsey and Company. And here's a map. It's actually an interactive map online if you want to go and have a look at it, of methane emissions in 2021. And the interactive part is that it will show you the time lapse from 1850. So Robert writes, global methane emissions from all sources were about 580 tons in 2022, according to the IEA. The largest emitters in millions of tons per year were China, the United States, India, Russia, Brazil, and Indonesia, according to Statista. Around 150 countries have now joined the Global Methane Pledge, which aims to reduce methane emissions from human activity by 30% from 2020 levels by 2030. So far, however, emissions are not falling, in spite of increasingly costly measures being taken in countries like the United States and Canada. So what are the prospects for this going through? Well, the parties may have no difficulty in endorsing goals that are defined at the global level, but which they will have little prospect of attaining at the national levels. And the developing countries that are the main sources of increasing energy demand will probably take measures to substantially increase electricity generation capacity, but it seems likely they'll continue in the path of investing primarily in affordable coal and natural gas-fired generation rather than renewables. So monitor and tax the easy political targets will drive up the costs for consumers. That's you. Similarly, it seems likely that a number of countries will announce new measures to monitor oil and gas-related methane emissions and to impose taxes on producers, nominally intended to discourage methane emissions. This will increase natural gas prices for consumers because, of course, it's all passed along to you, and it will add more funds to government treasuries. The oil and gas industry makes an easy political target. However, given the broad range of methane emission sources by economic sector and by country, it's very unlikely that countries will even attain the goals of the global methane pledge, let alone eliminate methane emissions from the global oil and gas industry. And just to let you know, you already gave $5 million at the office for monitoring. You probably didn't know that. Plus, you also gave a few contracts. And this is the recent news. Canadian company launches first commercial satellite to track industrial releases of CO2 and methane. So that was one of their grants. Was the objective of the proposed project is to advance the concept of an innovative miniaturized instrument which uses a novel measurement concept for high spatial resolution and high sensitivity satellite-based methane monitoring. Benefits to Canada include the direct application of space technology to fight climate change. So yes, now we're even fighting climate change from outer space. Someone's cashing in. Now, overall, I just read you the things that Robert Lyman wrote, but in reading them, what came to my mind was the Club of Rome and their commitments for the global commons. And it sounds like what COP28 is all about is really trying to implement the planetary emergency plan of the Club of Rome, which is an unelected, unaccountable, transnational organization that's been spooking the entire world for decades. Their first big spooky thing was that we would die from overpopulation. So I don't know that these guys are really the people that we want to rely on, and I'm not sure that we really want to follow what they're up to because we never elected them. So anyway, that's just my little comment there before we end this, before we wrap this up. We've now done 4 of 6 parts of the 6 themes of COP28. Got 2 more to go. And if you like what we do, we'd love to have a little help from you. I want to thank you for tuning in and for following us. Please subscribe, please share our material. It's very important that people understand that these climate conferences, which seem kind of like airy-fairy fluffy things that, climate nutters fly off to, and it's annoying that they do, but who cares? Everybody's got a hobby that they love, right? Um, these have very significant impacts on your life and on your pocketbook. COP28, it's all about the money, and it's all about how to get more of your money, unfortunately. So join us for the next two segments, and I thank you very much for watching. For Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Sterling, and special thanks to Robert Lyman for putting together these analyses so that, he's a policy expert. He was with the federal government for 27 years and spent most of his career working on GHG related stuff. He was a diplomat for 10 years, and he's contributed hundreds of articles and reports to us over the years. Many great insights. So thanks very much to Robert Lyman as well. Stay tuned for our next segment.